Beneath the rolling hills of southeastern Europe, hidden for thousands of years, lie the secrets of a civilization shrouded in mystery, the Thracians. These fierce warriors, whose legends rival even the Spartans in bravery, left behind more than just tales of battle. They built tombs elaborate, haunting, and filled with artifacts that defy explanation. Picture this: gold masks that seem to whisper forgotten names, weapons too heavy for any human to wield, and murals depicting rituals no modern scholar can fully decipher. These aren't just relics, they're riddles carved in stone, waiting for someone to unravel them. What makes the Thracians so fascinating isn't just their skill in war, but the eerie precision of their burials. Each tomb is a time capsule sealed with purpose, as if the dead were meant to return. Some contain skeletons draped in gold, their hands clutching strange amulets. Others hold empty sarcophagi, as though the occupants vanished without a trace. And then there are the discoveries that shouldn't exist: objects crafted with techniques far ahead of their time, or symbols that match no known language. It's as if the Thracians buried their dead with one final message, a puzzle meant to echo across millennia. Today, we're stepping into the shadows of these ancient chambers to uncover 25 of the most unsettling and unexplained finds ever pulled from Thracian soil. From cursed treasures to cryptic inscriptions that still stump linguists, each discovery raises more questions than answers. Who were these people really? What did they believe about life, death, and what lies beyond? And why did they go to such lengths to protect their secrets? This isn't just a tour through dusty ruins. It's a journey into the unknown, where every artifact tells a story that challenges everything we think we know about the past. So, ready your curiosity. The Thracians are waiting to speak. Buried deep within a Thracian burial mound, archaeologists uncovered an object so stunning it rewrote what we thought we knew about this ancient culture: the golden funeral mask of a Thracian king. This wasn't just a decoration, it was a masterpiece hammered from a single sheet of gold so thin it would have shimmered like living flame in torchlight. The craftsmanship rivals the legendary death masks of Mycenae, yet this one bears no name, no inscription, just a face frozen in silent authority, staring back across 25 centuries. Who was this king? Why did his people go to such lengths to preserve his likeness, only to let his name vanish from history? The mask's design is deliberate, almost unsettling. Unlike the serene expressions of Egyptian pharaohs, this one captures something raw: a furrowed brow, intense eyes, a mouth set in grim determination. Some scholars believe it wasn't just a tribute to the dead, but a conduit, a way to bind the king's spirit to the tomb forever. Thracian warriors were said to fear dishonor more than death, and this mask might have been their answer to immortality, keeping their ruler's presence alive in the underworld. Others argue it served a darker purpose, a final seal to prevent the dead from returning. Without a single word carved beside it, the truth slips further into speculation. Even more puzzling is how this artifact ended up where it did. The Mycenaean Greeks had similar masks, but theirs were buried centuries earlier. Was this a coincidence or proof of a lost connection between these civilizations? The Thracians left no written records, so every glint of gold becomes a clue in an endless detective story. One thing's certain: whoever wore this mask wielded power beyond mere mortal rule. His tomb held weapons, jewels, even sacrificed horses, as if his subjects believed he'd need them again. But the mask itself, that was meant for something far greater, a face not just for this world, but for whatever lay beyond. Deep in the heart of a Thracian burial complex, archaeologists made a discovery that sent chills down their spines: rows of skeletons, not merely buried, but meticulously wrapped in gleaming silver foil from head to toe. These weren't just ordinary remains, they were transformed into shimmering specters, their bones encased in metal so thin it clung to them like a second skin. No other ancient culture is known to have practiced this eerie rite, leaving experts scrambling for answers. Was this a display of unimaginable wealth, a sacred ritual to cheat death, or a desperate attempt to lock something dangerous beneath the earth? The sight of these silver-clad skeletons is nothing short of haunting. Imagine peeling back layers of soil only to find a figure glinting in the dim light, its hollow eye socket staring blankly through a metallic veil. Some were laid to rest with their arms crossed, as if in peaceful slumber, while others were found in contorted positions, suggesting their burial was anything but tranquil. The silver itself is a marvel beaten to near translucent thinness, a testament to Thracian metallurgical skill far beyond what historians expected for the time. But here's the real mystery. Silver wasn't just rare in Thrace, it was sacred, reserved for gods and kings. Its use here hints at something far more profound than mere status. One theory suggests the silver acted as a barrier, shielding the dead from restless spirits or worse, preventing them from rising. Thracian lore speaks of warriors so formidable, even death couldn't contain them. Could this have been a precaution against the dead walking? Others argue it was alchemical, an attempt to purify the soul by merging it with a metal believed to hold moonlight's power. Then there's the unsettling possibility that these individuals weren't just honored, they were feared. Some skeletons show signs of violent trauma, their silver shrouds less a tribute and more a prison. Without written records, we're left with a jumble of clues, a metal embrace, silent and cold, holding secrets we may never unravel. What makes this find even more unsettling is its isolation. No neighboring cultures practiced anything like it, and within Thrace itself, the ritual appears confined to a single, shadowy period. Were these the remains of a secretive cult or victims of a forgotten plague sealed away to stop contagion, both literal and supernatural? The silver skeletons refused to give up their secrets easily, but one thing is clear: whoever they were, their people wanted them to stay buried. Whether to protect the living or imprison the dead, the intention was absolute. And as the last traces of foil flake away under modern touch, we're left to wonder, were they sealed in silver to honor them, or to keep something inside from getting out? One of the most baffling structures ever uncovered in Thracian territory isn't a tomb at all, at least, not in the traditional sense. Instead, archaeologists stumbled upon a sprawling underground labyrinth, its winding passages stretching for hundreds of feet beneath the earth with no clear center, no grand burial chamber, just corridor after corridor twisting into darkness. Unlike the silver-wrapped skeletons or golden masks, this place feels deliberately unsettling, as if its builders wanted anyone who entered to lose their way forever. The walls are bare, devoid of the usual carvings or offerings, and in some sections there's no trace of human remains at all. So why does this maze exist? Was it a trap, a test, or something far more ominous? The design itself defies logic. Some tunnels dead end abruptly, others loop back on themselves, and a few slope downward at angles so steep they'd be treacherous to navigate even with modern light. It's as if the architects weren't just building a resting place for the dead, they were engineering confusion. One theory suggests this was the Thracian answer to grave robbers, a booby-trapped puzzle meant to frustrate would-be thieves. After all, why stash treasures in a single chamber when you can scatter them through a network of false paths, leaving looters to wander until they give up, or worse? But here's the catch: very few valuables have been found inside, just the occasional broken pottery or rusted blade. If this was a decoy, where's the real prize? Another possibility cuts closer to the spiritual. Thracian beliefs about the afterlife were complex, with some texts describing the soul's journey as a series of trials. Could this labyrinth have been a physical manifestation of that voyage, a place where the living or the dead had to prove their worth before moving on? The empty passages might then represent failed attempts, souls forever lost in the twists and turns. Yet the most chilling theory comes from local folklore, which whispers of hollow men, entities that slip between worlds. Could the labyrinth have been built not to guide the dead, but to contain something that shouldn't escape? What's certain is that this place wasn't meant to be remembered. Unlike the grand tombs of kings, there are no markers, no inscriptions, just silence and shadows. Even today, with drones and 3D mapping, sections remain unexplored, their secrets buried too deep. Whether it was a fortress for the dead or a prison for something else, one thing's clear: the Thracians didn't want this labyrinth found, and after 2,000 years, it's still guarding its secrets well. Among the most breathtaking Thracian tomb discoveries is the remains of a warrior laid to rest not just with weapons or jewels, but with an entire chariot, still hitched to the bones of two massive horses. It's a scene frozen in time. The wooden frame of the chariot, though decayed, left clear impressions in the earth, its bronze fittings glittering as if freshly polished. The horses were positioned as though ready to charge, their legs bent in mid-gallop, forever poised to carry their master into battle. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a statement, a spectacle of power so grand it defies modern logic. Why sacrifice such prized possessions, vehicles that were the tanks of the ancient world, animals bred for war, to the darkness of a tomb? The answer might lie in the Thracians' unshakable belief that death wasn't an end but a transition. Unlike the Egyptians, who stocked tombs with everyday comforts, or the Vikings, who sent ships blazing into the afterlife, the Thracians seemed obsessed with readiness. This warrior wasn't just buried with his chariot, he was equipped for a fight beyond the grave. Historical accounts describe Thracian warriors as fearless, convinced that fallen heroes join the gods in an eternal feast, but only if they arrived victorious. Could this chariot have been their version of a ticket to paradise, ensuring their champion rode straight into the halls of the divine? Yet there's another layer to this mystery. Chariots were rare even among the living elite, symbols of status as much as tools of war. Burying one intact wasn't just spiritual, it was a flex, a way to shout a warrior's importance into eternity. The horses tell their own story. Their teeth show they were in peak condition, well fed and cared for, suggesting they were chosen specifically for this moment. Some archaeologists argue this was less about the afterlife and more about legacy, a permanent monument to a leader whose name might otherwise fade. What sets the Thracians apart, though, is the sheer scale of these burials. Celtic chieftains might be buried with a sword or a shield, and Mesopotamian kings with a single ceremonial chariot, but Thracian tombs sometimes contain multiple chariots, horses, even spare wheels, as if anticipating a drawn-out campaign in the underworld. One particularly lavish site held not just a chariot, but a full set of armor for the horses, their heads adorned with silver plaques. The message was clear: in death, as in life, these warriors would spare no expense. The most unsettling detail: some chariots show signs of deliberate sabotage, broken axles, slashed reins, as if to ensure they could never be used by anyone else. Whether to bind them eternally to their owner or to prevent grave robbers from stealing such prizes, the act feels almost like a curse, and perhaps that's the point. For the Thracians, death wasn't passive. It was a battleground where status, belief, and ambition collided. This chariot wasn't just buried, it was enlisted, one final soldier in a war without end. In a secluded Thracian tomb, untouched by sunlight for millennia, archaeologists uncovered walls that told stories no living scholar could read, vibrant frescoes bursting with color, their meanings as elusive as the people who painted them. Unlike the predictable scenes of gods and battles found in other ancient cultures, these murals depict bizarre tableaus, hybrid creatures with human bodies and stag heads, figures cloaked in swirling geometric patterns, and what appears to be a ritual where participants float mid-air. But one image stops you cold: a towering figure with the body of a man and the head of a wolf, its eyes glowing red despite centuries of fading pigment. Is this a forgotten god, a shaman mid-transformation, or evidence of beliefs so alien we've yet to decipher them? The wolf-headed figure isn't just an outlier, it's the centerpiece of its chamber, painted larger than life on the tomb's rear wall. Curiously, no known Thracian texts or later Roman accounts mention such a deity, leaving experts to piece together clues from the imagery itself. The figure holds a crescent moon in one hand and a bound prisoner in the other, suggesting a duality: protection and vengeance, night and hunt. Nearby, smaller frescoes show human figures offering what might be sacrifices to it, their bodies bent in postures of supplication. Yet there's no consistency in these depictions. Some tombs show similar figures with bull or bird features, as if the Thracians worshipped a pantheon of shape-shifting spirits. One radical theory proposes these aren't deities at all, but records of actual rituals. Siberian shamans, for example, wore animal skulls during ceremonies to channel the creature's spirit. Could the Thracians have practiced something similar, their frescoes documenting real transformations? The red pigment used for the wolf's eyes adds fuel to this idea. It's not just ochre, but cinnabar, a mercury-based mineral toxic to handle. Those who painted this might have risked poisoning to capture something they believed was sacred. Or perhaps the answer lies in the stars. The crescent moon in the figure's hand aligns with Thracian burial sites oriented to lunar cycles, hinting at a celestial cult lost to time. The most unsettling detail, though, is what's missing. In Egyptian tombs, hieroglyphs explain every divine scene. Greek vases label their gods, but these walls are silent, no inscriptions, no repeated symbols to decode. It's as if the images were meant only for those who already understood them, a visual language meant to die with its creators. Even more perplexing, some frescoes appear altered, figures painted over, colors layered hastily. Were these edits corrections, or did beliefs shift so drastically that old gods had to be erased? The wolf-headed being might hold the key, but without words, its story slips through our fingers like smoke. What's clear is that these weren't mere decorations. The tomb's layout suggests the frescoes were positioned to guide the dead, with the hybrid figure facing the entrance like a sentinel. Was it meant to intimidate spirits or welcome them? The debate rages, but one thing's certain: the Thracians didn't paint their mysteries for us. They painted them for whatever comes after. And as the pigments slowly fade under modern lights, we're left staring into the eyes of a creature that refuses to reveal its name. Tucked inside a cracked ceramic urn, sealed for over 2,000 years, lay fragments of the past so delicate they crumbled at a touch: the Orphic scrolls. These weren't just any texts, they were whispers from a shadowy cult that worshipped the god Dionysus in ways so secret, even the Greeks feared them. The scroll's brittle papyrus bears inscriptions in a cryptic dialect describing underworld rivers, trials of the soul, and a path of stars leading initiates to eternal bliss. But here's what chills historians: the few legible lines don't match any known Orphic text from Greece. Were these Thracian variations of the same mysteries, or something far older and darker that the Greeks merely borrowed? The urn itself tells a story of desperation. It wasn't just buried, it was hidden beneath the false floor of a tomb, as if protecting its contents from prying eyes. The scrolls inside were tightly wound, their edges charred not by accident but deliberately, like someone tried to burn them before changing their mind. Was this an attempt to destroy heresy or to preserve knowledge too dangerous to share? The fragments speak of the price of memory, warning that some truths come with a curse. One passage describes initiates drinking a potion of milk, honey, and blood to erase their past lives before crossing into the afterlife. Another mentions a gatekeeper with silver eyes, a figure found nowhere else in Mediterranean mythology. What makes these scrolls so tantalizing is their fractured nature. Unlike Egyptian Book of the Dead papyri, complete, lavish, and meant to guide every step of the journey, these texts are disjointed, almost frantic. Symbols repeat in odd places, serpents coiled around trees, torches extinguished mid-flame, and a recurring motif of the unspoken name. Some scholars believe this was code, a way to shield sacred knowledge from outsiders. Others argue the gaps themselves are the message that the Thracian Orphics believed true enlightenment couldn't be written, only experienced, the most haunting detail. A single scroll, better preserved than the rest, ends mid-sentence with the phrase, "and the earth will," before the papyrus disintegrates. Was this a prophecy cut short, a spell left unfinished, or a warning interrupted by time? The urn offers no clues, only its heavy silence. For now, the scrolls remain as they were found, fragments of a puzzle meant to stay broken, guarding secrets their creators swore would outlast the stars. Hidden among the usual bronze and iron weapons in a Thracian warrior's tomb, archaeologists uncovered something that shouldn't exist: arrowheads carved not from stone or metal, but from pure rock crystal. These translucent blades, sharp enough to draw blood even after millennia, shimmer like ice in the light, their edges so precise they could rival modern surgical tools. The craftsmanship is staggering, but the real mystery is why. Rock crystal is brutally difficult to shape, requiring hours of painstaking grinding with primitive tools. Flint was plentiful, bronze was durable, so why choose a material so fragile, so rare, and so needlessly complex? Were these mere symbols of power, or did they serve a purpose beyond our understanding? The answer might lie in the crystal itself. Unlike flint, which fractures unpredictably, or metal, which dulls over time, rock crystal maintains a near-mythical sharpness. Some scholars argue these weren't weapons for battle but tools for rituals, perhaps used in bloodletting ceremonies or to carve sacred symbols into wood or flesh. Thracian shamans were said to harness the breath of the gods, and crystal, with its ability to refract light into rainbows, might have been seen as a conduit for divine energy. One tomb even held an arrowhead placed on the corpse's lips as if sealing a final prayer. But here's the twist: a few of these arrowheads show wear patterns, tiny grooves along the edges suggesting they were fired repeatedly. If they were ceremonial, why use them at all? Experiments with replicas reveal something startling: crystal arrowheads fly straighter and pierce deeper than flint, their smooth surface reducing drag. Were the Thracians pioneers of ballistics, or did they believe crystal carried some supernatural advantage? The material's brittleness makes this reckless unless they intended the arrows to shatter inside the target, ensuring wounds that couldn't be stitched closed. The most unsettling discovery comes from a battlefield site miles from any tomb. Amidst broken swords and shattered shields, excavators found a single crystal arrowhead embedded in a Roman soldier's spine, proof these weren't just for show. Whoever wielded them must have been elite, perhaps even feared, their arrows as much a psychological weapon as a physical one. Imagine facing a warrior whose projectiles glittered like starlight before they struck, leaving no chance for survival. Whether practical or mystical, these crystal blades were a statement. The Thracians didn't just master their world, they transcended it. Yet the biggest question remains unanswered: where did they get the crystal? No local sources exist, and trading for such quantities would have been exorbitant. Unless, like so much of Thracian culture, this too was part of a secret, one buried with the last archer who knew the truth. Today, the arrowheads sit in museum cases, their edges still sharp, their purpose still cutting through time. In one of the most unsettling Thracian tomb discoveries, skeletons lie in silent repose, but not a single one still has its head. Some skulls were replaced with the bleached bones of wolves or bears, carefully positioned where human remains should have been. Others show vertebrae cleanly severed, the missing heads nowhere to be found in the burial chamber. This isn't just a case of grave robbery or decay. The precision suggests intention. Were these fallen warriors, their heads taken as trophies by enemies? Victims of ritual sacrifice, or were they members of a forgotten cult that believed separating the soul from the body required literal division? these headless burials stand in stark contrast to Thracian customs. Most elite tombs show meticulous care for the dead, gold masks shielding faces, hands clasping amulets, bodies arranged in postures of eternal rest. But here, the message is different. One tomb held a skeleton with a bear's skull placed reverently over its neck, the animal's teeth polished to a shine. Another contained a warrior buried with 8 severed heads encircling him, none matching the decapitated body at the center. The brutality clashes with the Thracians' usual funerary artistry, forcing us to ask, was this punishment or honor? Comparisons to other European headless burials deepen the mystery. Celtic sites sometimes display skulls as war trophies, mounted on spikes or displayed in sanctuaries. The ancient Scythians, like the Thracians, practiced ritual decapitation, but only for enemies, never their own. What sets these Thracian tombs apart is the ceremonial replacement of human skulls with animal ones. A wolf's head might symbolize ferocity in battle, a bear's perhaps strength in the afterlife. Or was this a form of transference, the animal's spirit replacing the humans to guide it elsewhere? The most chilling possibility emerges from Thracian texts rescued from Greek sources. Fragments speak of the headless ones, a class of spirits neither living nor dead, who served as messengers between worlds. Could these burials represent an attempt to create such beings, deliberately severing the mind from the body to free the soul for travel? It's a grim theory, but the evidence leans toward ritual rather than violence. Several skeletons show no signs of combat wounds, and the animal skulls are often adorned with gold leaf, suggesting reverence, not desecration. One tomb holds the key, a single intact burial where the skull was removed after decomposition, the jawbone still nestled against the collarbone. This wasn't an act of war, it was a second funeral, a rite performed long after death. Perhaps the Thracians believed the soul lingered in the head, requiring its removal to fully release the deceased. The animal substitutes might then have been guardians placed to protect the body, or warnings ensuring whatever left that skull didn't return. As excavations continue, the headless burials remain an enigma. Unlike the golden masks or silver-wrapped corpses, these graves offer no glittering treasures, no murals to explain their meaning. Just bones, absence, and the silent weight of questions we may never answer. Whatever their purpose, one thing is certain: the Thracians understood death as more than an end. It was a transformation, sometimes, it seems, a forcible one. Buried beneath layers of earth in a Thracian chieftain's tomb, a tarnished bronze disc no larger than a dinner plate holds a secret that redefines our understanding of ancient astronomy. Etched into its surface are 12 intricate symbols, some resembling animals, others celestial patterns arranged in a perfect circle, as if mapping the heavens themselves. At first glance, it could pass for a crude zodiac, but the details tell a different story. One segment shows a stag with antlers stretching into star-like points, while another depicts a serpent coiled around what might be a crescent moon. This isn't just decoration, it's a coded sky, one that predates Greek and Babylonian star charts by centuries. Was this the Thracians' way of tracking time, worshipping gods, or something far more profound? The disc's craftsmanship suggests it was no ordinary artifact. Unlike the ceremonial weapons or golden masks found in nearby tombs, this object shows signs of wear, tiny scratches along the edges, grooves where fingers might have gripped it. Some researchers argue it was a practical tool, a primitive astrolabe used to predict solstices or planting seasons. The symbols align with known Thracian constellations, like the Great Stag and the Serpent's Path, which appear in no other Mediterranean tradition. But here's the puzzle: if it was merely an agricultural calendar, why bury it with a king? Others believe the disc was a sacred object, a bridge between earth and the divine. Thracian priests, known as the Cloud Walkers, were said to read omens in the stars, and this disc might have been their ritual compass. One symbol, a figure holding what looks like a lightning bolt, matches descriptions of Zybalthiodos, a storm god whose name translates to sky hammer. Could the disc have been used to summon his favor or to navigate the afterlife's celestial rivers? The tomb's layout fuels this theory. The disc was placed near the skeleton's left hand, mirroring the position of a modern navigator's compass. The most tantalizing theory, though, is that the Thracians knew more about the stars than history credits them for. Unlike the rigid 12-sign zodiac of the Babylonians, this disc's symbols shift and blend, suggesting a fluid understanding of constellations. One segment shows a wolf howling at a cluster of dots, a possible reference to the Pleiades, which Thracian lore linked to the gates of the underworld. Another depicts a horse leaping over a star, a motif later found in Greek myths about the sun god's chariot. Did the Greeks borrow these ideas, or were they part of a lost Thracian tradition that saw the cosmos not as fixed points, but as a living, changing entity? What makes the disc truly unique is its imperfections. The symbols aren't evenly spaced, some overlap, others are crammed together as if added over generations. This wasn't a static map, but a living document, updated as knowledge grew. A recent laser scan revealed faint markings beneath the visible etchings, older symbols erased and replaced. Whoever used this disc didn't just observe the stars, they conversed with them, adapting their beliefs as the night sky shifted. Yet the disc's ultimate purpose remains just out of reach. Was it a guide for kings to rule by celestial will, a shaman's tool to harness cosmic energy, or proof that the Thracians, often dismissed as barbarians by their neighbors, were in fact the forgotten astronomers of antiquity? The bronze has oxidized green with time, but the symbols still gleam where fingertips once traced them, as if waiting for someone to read their message aloud. Until then, the disc spins its silent story, one where science and spirit orbit the same unbreakable circle. Inside a forgotten Thracian tomb, archaeologists uncovered something that didn't belong among the silent treasures: ceramic vases that hum when the wind blows. These aren't ordinary pots, they're intricate instruments hollowed with internal chambers and precision, cut holes that transform passing air into ghostly whispers. Pick one up and it's silent, but tilt it just right and the tomb fills with a sound like distant chanting, a low drone that seems to rise from the earth itself. Modern acousticians who studied these vases were stunned. The frequencies they produce aren't random, they're tuned to resonate at the exact pitch known to induce trance states in humans. Was this an ancient technology for communing with spirits, or something more unsettling? The craftsmanship defies simple explanation. Each vase contains a labyrinth of interior walls, some no thicker than a fingernail, channeling airflow into spiraling vibrations. One particularly eerie example, dubbed the mourner's vase, emits a wail resembling a woman's sobs when exposed to even the faintest breeze. Laboratory tests revealed its interior resembles the vocal tract of a human throat, with chambers mimicking the sinus cavity and larynx. The effect isn't accidental, it's bioacoustic engineering centuries ahead of its time. Thracian artisans somehow understood that sound wasn't just noise, it was architecture, something that could be sculpted from clay to manipulate the mind. What were these vases for? One theory points to ritual. Thracian shamans used drumming and chanting to cross between worlds, and these vases could have been their permanent orchestra, left in tombs to sing for the dead when storms rolled over the burial mound. Another possibility is darker, the vases as alarms. Positioned near tomb entrances, their moans would warn of intruders shifting the air currents, a prehistoric security system. But the most spine-tingling hypothesis comes from local folklore, which speaks of earth voices, spirits trapped in objects. Could the Thracians have believed these vases didn't just mimic voices but captured them? Recent experiments add fuel to the mystery. When played alongside recordings of Thracian chants discovered on the Orphic scrolls, the vase's drones harmonize perfectly, creating chords that physicists confirm can alter brainwave patterns. Even more uncanny, some vases only resonate at specific times of year during lunar eclipses or solstices, suggesting they weren't just tools but celestial calendars in sound. Today, replicas sit in labs, their songs still echoing a question. Were these the first known instruments designed not for the living, but for listeners in the world beyond? Among the most perplexing Thracian relics are slender iron rods, each no longer than a finger, twisted at one end into intricate loops and spirals. At first glance, they resemble primitive keys, except no locks exist in Thracian tombs to match them. These enigmatic objects, found clutched in skeletons' hands or arranged in neat rows along burial chambers, defy straightforward explanation. Why would a culture that buried its dead with chariots and golden masks also inter them with tiny, seemingly functionless iron twists? The answer might lie not in the physical world, but in the Thracians' vivid vision of the afterlife. The design of these so-called keys is anything but random. While most ancient ironwork was utilitarian nails, blades, hooks, these objects display deliberate artistry. Microscopic analysis reveals file marks so precise they suggest ritual significance, not haste. Some have tips sharpened to needle-like points, while others end in miniature spirals resembling serpents. Their uniformity across dozens of tombs hints at a shared belief, a language of metal understood by all Thracians. One compelling theory posits they were symbolic passports, meant to unlock gates in the underworld. Greek historians wrote of Thracian shamans who claimed to traverse celestial realms. Could these iron twists have been their talismans, crafted to navigate the afterlife's labyrinth? Yet another possibility emerges from their placement. Several were found near skeletons' chests or skulls, their sharp ends stained with traces of organic residue. This has led a minority of scholars to propose a grimmer purpose: early surgical tools, perhaps used in trepanation or ceremonial bloodletting. The spiraled ends might have served as handles, while the tapered tips could pierce skin or bone. But here's the catch: no contemporary accounts describe Thracians practicing such medicine, and the key's fragility makes them ill-suited for heavy use. Unless, of course, their purpose wasn't healing at all, but something more esoteric, releasing spirits trapped in the body by puncturing the flesh. The most haunting clue comes from a tomb in modern-day Bulgaria, where 22 iron keys lay arranged in a perfect circle around a warrior's body. Soil analysis revealed traces of burned herbs at the center: wormwood and henbane, plants known for their hallucinogenic properties. This suggests the keys might have been part of a final ritual, heated in sacred flames and pressed into the deceased's skin to unlock the soul. Later Roman texts mention Thracian death rites involving fire and iron, but dismiss them as barbaric superstition. What if they were witnessing a misunderstood technology of transcendence? Today, these iron artifacts sit in museum cases, their true function still debated. They share no resemblance with keys from neighboring cultures, nor do they align with any known practical tool of the era. Perhaps that's the point. The Thracians didn't leave instruction manuals, only silent metal whispers, twisted into shapes that still guard their secrets. Whether skeleton keys for the soul or instruments of forgotten ceremonies, one thing is clear: these weren't meant for locks made by human hands. In the heart of a Thracian queen's tomb, archaeologists unearthed a treasure that glittered like captured sunlight: thousands of amber beads, each no larger than a peppercorn, spilling from a rotted wooden chest. At first glance, they might seem like mere ornaments, but the numbers tell a different story. Over 35,000 beads were counted, enough to adorn dozens of royal garments. Yet the real mystery isn't their beauty, it's their origin. Amber this pure comes from the Baltic, over 1,000 miles to the north. How did these golden droplets end up buried in the Balkans, and why in such staggering abundance? The journey of these beads reads like an ancient thriller. Baltic amber was the gold of its day, traded along routes so secret even the Romans couldn't fully map them. Thracian middlemen likely bartered for it with furs, salt, or even slaves, hauling it south through dense forests and bandit-riddled passes. But here's the twist: most cultures prized amber for its rarity. The Thracians didn't just collect it, they hoarded it, stockpiling beads in quantities that dwarfed anything found in contemporary Greek or Persian sites. Was this pure wealth, or did the amber hold deeper meaning for them? One clue lies in how the beads were used. Unlike Egyptian pharaohs who wore amber as jewelry, Thracian nobles sewed beads into burial shrouds, stitching them in patterns that mirrored constellations. Laboratory analysis revealed something startling. Many beads show microscopic wear, not from being worn but from constant handling. Shamans across northern Europe believed amber captured the sun's power, warding off evil spirits. Could the Thracians have shared this belief, using the beads as a kind of spiritual armor for the afterlife? The beads' arrangement in the tomb supports this theory. They weren't scattered haphazardly but layered in concentric circles around the queen's body, with larger, more intricate beads placed over her heart and brow. Some were even drilled with tiny holes, perhaps to thread invisible protections, hair or sinew long since decayed. Even more intriguing, a handful of beads tested positive for trace amounts of mercury, suggesting they might have been soaked in potions to enhance their mystical properties. Trade records from Greek colonies hint at amber's value in Thrace. One merchant's ledger mentions a single bead trading for 2 healthy oxen, making this hoard worth a kingdom's ransom. But why bury such wealth? The answer might lie in the bead's final placement, sealed not just in the tomb, but beneath the queen's feet, as if she stood atop a golden river flowing into the underworld. For a culture that believed death was a journey, perhaps these weren't just beads. They were currency for whatever lay beyond, paid in advance to ensure safe passage. Today, the amber glows as warmly as it did 2 millennia ago, its secrets locked inside each tiny sphere. The Thracians left no ledgers, no maps of their trade routes, just this golden hoard, whispering of connections that spanned continents and beliefs that turned sunlight into something sacred. Whether amulets, offerings, or a queen's final bargaining chip, one thing's clear: these beads weren't just buried, they were planted like seeds for a harvest only the dead could reap. Buried beneath the earth of a Thracian burial mound lies a chamber unlike any other, its walls alive with motion. Carved in stunning relief, a procession of women whirls across the stone, their draped garments frozen mid-swirl, their arms arched gracefully above their heads as if caught in the middle of some sacred dance. They aren't the stiff, formal figures seen in Greek or Roman art. These women pulse with energy, their sandaled feet seemingly ready to step right off the walls. But who were they? Mourners lost in grief, priestess mid-ritual, or something far more otherworldly, guides sent to lead the dead into the afterlife with movement instead of words? What sets these dancing figures apart is their sheer vitality. In a culture often defined by warrior burials and masculine iconography, this tomb stands as a rare celebration of feminine power. Unlike the rigid processions of Assyrian reliefs or the passive goddesses of early Minoan art, these women command the space. Some hold what appear to be tambourines or wreaths, while others clasp hands in intricate chain dances reminiscent of Balkan folk traditions still practiced today. The detailing is extraordinary: fingernails, braided hair, even the folds of fabric weighted by unseen wind are rendered with a realism that suggests the carvers didn't just imagine these figures. They witnessed them. Scholars are divided on their purpose. One school of thought argues they depict actual funeral rites, with professional mourners known as kledons who dance to ward off evil spirits. Ancient texts describe Thracian burial processions accompanied by rhythmic stomping and clashing of bronze shields, a far cry from the serene lyre music of Greek funerals. But others point to the women's expressions, not sorrowful but ecstatic, their lips parted as if singing or chanting. Could they represent the mythical Maenads, female followers of Dionysus who danced themselves into trances? A few figures even wear animal pelts, blurring the line between human and divine. The most tantalizing clue lies in their positioning. The dancers don't just adorn the walls, they spiral inward toward the tomb's central chamber, their motion leading the eye to what was once a raised stone bier. This wasn't random decoration, it was a deliberate path choreographed in stone. Recent laser scans revealed traces of pigment red ochre on their lips, blue on their skirts, suggesting the reliefs were originally painted to heighten the illusion of movement under flickering torchlight. Imagine standing in that chamber centuries ago, the figures seeming to step forward as shadows danced across them. What truly baffles historians is the contrast with neighboring cultures. Egyptian tombs show women as passive mourners, Greek vases depict them as static brides or weavers, but here they're dynamic, central, almost supernatural. Even the Scythians, famed for their warrior women, buried them with weapons, not artistry. The Thracians may have been the only ancient society to grant women this kind of ceremonial prominence in death. Were they honoring real priestesses or creating an eternal escort of spirits to guide their fallen king? The tomb offers no inscriptions, no names, just motion frozen in time. Perhaps that's the point. These women weren't meant to be labeled or understood. They were meant to move, to dance, to carry the dead beyond the boundaries of the known world. And as the last flicker of torchlight fades from the chamber walls, their silent performance continues, an endless rite no burial mound could ever contain. Beneath the flickering torchlight of a newly opened Thracian tomb, archaeologists spotted something that shouldn't exist: a series of shallow depressions in the stone floor, each filled with a shimmering silver liquid. Mercury, not just traces or residue, but actual pools of the toxic metal, undisturbed for over 2,000 years. This wasn't an accident or some natural phenomenon. The depressions were carefully carved, their edges too precise, their placement too deliberate. Mercury was precious in antiquity, far harder to obtain than gold, yet here it sat, poured like water into the earth. What could possibly justify such a reckless, extravagant ritual? The answer might lie in Mercury's paradoxical reputation. Ancient civilizations across the globe revered it despite its deadly nature. Chinese alchemists called it quicksilver, believing it held the key to immortality. Roman physicians used it in medicines, ignorant of its toxicity. But the Thracians seem to have had a different relationship with the metal altogether. Unlike the Egyptians, who used it sparingly in cosmetics, or the Greeks, who employed it in gilding, the Thracians appear to have treated mercury as something sacred, or perhaps something to be feared. One theory suggests these pools were part of an elaborate burial alchemy, meant to transform the dead. In Hindu tradition, Mercury symbolizes Shiva's semen, the essence of creation and destruction. Could the Thracians have seen it similarly, as a bridge between worlds? Then there's the practical angle. Mercury's reflective surface acts like a mirror, and some tombs show evidence of polished metal plates positioned above the pools. Under torchlight, the effect would have been dizzying, an illusion of the tomb stretching infinitely downward, as if the deceased were descending into another realm. But the most chilling possibility emerges from Thracian oral traditions, which speak of liquid silver used to trap restless spirits. Mercury doesn't evaporate easily at room temperature, meaning these pools would have remained ominously intact for centuries. Were they meant to ensnare something unseen, a toxic moat guarding against supernatural intruders? The risks of handling mercury were no secret even then. Ancient miners suffered tremors, madness, and death from exposure, ailments documented as early as Roman times. Yet the Thracians not only collected mercury but transported it across mountains to these remote tombs. The effort implies a purpose beyond mere symbolism. Modern tests reveal something stranger. Some pools contain traces of powdered cinnabar, the mercury ore also used in the tomb's red frescoes. This wasn't just raw metal, it was ritualistically prepared, possibly activated with other substances. A few skeletons near these pools show unnaturally red-stained bones, hinting at direct contact with cinnabar dust in their final moments. The most haunting question remains, why here? Other cultures reserved mercury for the living elixirs, cosmetics, even primitive batteries. But the Thracians buried it, sealing it away with their dead as if it were a weapon or a key. One tomb holds a clue, a stone tablet depicting a figure submerged waist-deep in a quicksilver lake, arms raised not in distress but triumph. Whether this was alchemy, poison, or a forbidden technology lost to time, one thing's certain: the Thracians didn't just fear mercury. They wielded it, and whatever they believed it could do, they took that secret to their graves, right beside the very pools meant to unlock it. In the shadowed recesses of a Thracian tomb, a row of statues stands silent, each one carved with exquisite detail, their faces noble, their postures regal. But these are no ordinary effigies. When archaeologists tapped their surfaces, the sound was hollow. Closer inspection revealed hidden seams, cleverly disguised within the folds of sculpted drapery. These statues had secrets. Some contained handfuls of ash, others tiny gold amulets or bundles of dried herbs. One even held a single wolf's tooth wrapped in a scrap of brittle linen. Were these vessels for the dead, containers for relics, or something far more unsettling, statues built not just to honor but to hold? The craftsmanship is astounding. Unlike solid funerary statues found in Greek or Egyptian tombs, these hollow figures suggest a deeper purpose. The compartments weren't an afterthought. They were designed into the very structure, with lids so finely fitted they're nearly invisible. Some are large enough to hold a human heart, others no bigger than a thimble. The contents vary wildly: ashes in one, seeds in another, a few with nothing but dust. This inconsistency is the real puzzle. If these were simple urns, why not standardize them? If they stored treasures, why hide them in plain sight? The answer might lie in the statue's poses. Each one holds its hands slightly cupped, as if offering something, or perhaps waiting to receive it. Comparisons to other cultures only deepen the mystery. Egyptian shabti statues were meant to serve the dead in the afterlife, while Greek Kouros figures commemorated the departed. But the Thracian hollow statues don't fit either mold. Their hidden chambers suggest a belief that the spirit needed a physical anchor, a place to reside beyond the body. One theory points to local legends of walking statues, stones said to come alive under moonlight. Could these have been ritual vessels meant to house a presence too powerful to leave unrestrained? The wolf's tooth, a recurring symbol in Thracian burials, hints at a guardian role, something sharp and watchful sealed inside. Then there's the eerie counterpoint. A few compartments were found empty, their interiors scoured clean, as if whatever they once held had been removed deliberately. Were these meant for spirits that had moved on, or did someone or something take what belonged inside? Modern scans reveal scratch marks on the inner walls of one statue, fine grooves that spiral unnervingly, like something trying to get out. Perhaps the most telling clue comes from their placement. These statues weren't clustered near the dead. They lined the tomb's entrance, facing outward like sentinels. Guardians, then, or traps? The Thracians left no explanations, only these silent figures with their hollow cores waiting, even now, for whatever they were meant to contain. Among the most haunting Thracian graves are those where human bones lie tangled with animal remains, not as simple offerings, but as deliberate, almost grotesque unions. In one tomb, a warrior's skeleton clutches the lower jaw of a wolf between its ribs, the predator's teeth still razor-sharp against the human bones. Another holds the wings of an eagle, their feathers long since crumbled to dust, but the delicate wing bones arranged as if mid-flight across the corpse's chest. These aren't haphazard deposits of trophies or food for the afterlife. They are intimate, unsettling mergers, as if the dead were being reshaped into something new, something neither fully human nor beast, but a fusion of both. The precision of these burials suggests deep ritual significance. Unlike other cultures that buried animals whole as sacrifices or companions, the Thracians selected specific body parts with surgical care. Wolf jaws appear most frequently, often positioned over the skeleton's throat or hands, their canines pointing outward like natural weapons. Deer antlers sometimes crown skulls anchored by strips of long rotted leather. Even more striking are the rare cases where animal bones replace human ones. A bear's femur standing in for a warrior's missing leg, or a bird's hollow wing bones threaded onto a necklace of human vertebrae. Each arrangement feels like a coded language, a physical prayer for transformation. What were they trying to achieve? One theory points to totemic magic, where adopting animal traits granted power. Thracian shamans reportedly wore pelts during rituals to channel the spirit of wolves or bears, and these burials might reflect a permanent version of that practice. A warrior buried with a wolf's jaw could have been a famed hunter, his remains reforged into the very predator he once emulated in life. The eagle wings, meanwhile, evoke flight, perhaps an attempt to lift the soul skyward beyond the reach of earthly chains. But there's a darker interpretation. Some hybrid burials show signs of violence, the human bones splintered where animal parts were inserted, as if forced into place. One adolescent skeleton discovered near the Danube had the skull of a raven wedged into its ribcage, the bird's beak cracked against the sternum. Was this punishment a way to bind a restless spirit to a scavenger's fate, or a desperate cure, an attempt to heal the dead with animal vitality? The Thracians believed illness could be stolen by animals. Maybe they thought death could be cheated the same way. The most enigmatic examples blur the line between ritual and biology. In a tomb in modern-day Bulgaria, a young woman was buried with the pelvis of a hare fused to her own, the bones carefully drilled and bound with silver wire. Was she a priestess embodying fertility symbolism, or was this a literal attempt to graft animal traits onto human flesh? Nearby, a child's skeleton bore the tail vertebrae of a fox along its spine, each tiny bone stitched into place with gold thread. These aren't mere adornments, they're anatomical experiments, as if the living hoped to rewrite the rules of death itself. Perhaps the truth lies in the Thracians' view of the afterlife as a realm where boundaries dissolved. To them, animals weren't just beasts, they were guides, ancestors, even alternate forms of the self. By burying their dead as hybrids, they might have been ensuring safe passage. A wolf's ferocity to guard against underworld demons, an eagle's vision to navigate starless skies. Or maybe they feared the dead would forget their humanity altogether, and these animal parts were anchors tethering them to the world they once knew. The graves offer no easy answers, only silent testimony to a belief system that saw no divide between human and beast, life and death. As the last traces of fur and feather crumble under archaeologists' brushes, one thing lingers: the certainty that for the Thracians, death wasn't an end. It was an evolution, and sometimes evolution required teeth. Beneath the ashes of a long-dead fire, nestled in the heart of a Thracian burial mound, lies a mystery that defies the usual rituals of death: skeletons blackened not by time but by deliberate flame. These bones bear the telltale cracks and deep charring of exposure to intense heat, yet they weren't cremated in the traditional sense. Instead, they were scorched just enough to darken the surface, as if someone took meticulous care to burn them without turning them to ash. This wasn't an accident or a hasty funeral pyre. It was a calculated act, one that raises a chilling question. Why would a culture known for lavishing gold and silver on its dead suddenly choose to mar their remains with fire? The Thracians weren't alone in using fire to honor or pacify the dead. The Vikings sent their fallen heroes to Valhalla aboard blazing ships, while the Romans often cremated their dead to purify the soul. But the Thracian approach stands apart. In most cremation rites, bones are reduced to fragments or powder, symbolic of the body's release from the physical world. Here, the bones remain intact, charred but whole, like logs pulled from a hearth mid-burn. Some show patterns of blistering that suggest they were held over flames rather than fully immersed, a practice with no parallel in neighboring cultures. Was this a middle ground between burial and cremation, a way to alter the body without destroying it completely? One theory points to purification. Fire has long been seen as a cleanser, a force capable of burning away impurity. In Zoroastrian tradition, for example, corpses were exposed to flame to prevent contamination of sacred earth. Could the Thracians have shared this belief, using controlled burns to sanctify the dead before burial? The evidence leans toward ritual over practicality. Many charred skeletons wear untouched gold jewelry, their ornaments spared from the flames as if the fire were meant for flesh alone. Yet there's a darker possibility. Across Eastern Europe, folklore warns of the moroi, the restless dead who rise to torment the living. Fire was one of the few sure ways to stop them. Were these corpses singed to ensure they stayed in their graves? The bones themselves add layers to the puzzle. Some show signs of being burned post-mortem, their fractures consistent with dry bone exposed to heat. Others, however, tell a grimmer tale: greenstick fractures, the kind that occur in fresh bone, suggesting these individuals may have been burned alive. Could this have been a fate reserved for criminals or captives, a warning etched into their very skeletons, or was it something more transcendent? Thracian myths speak of heroes who walked through fire to gain immortality, their bodies transformed but not consumed. Perhaps these charred remains were attempts to replicate that apotheosis, turning mortal flesh into something impervious to decay. What makes this practice even more enigmatic is its rarity. Unlike the silver-wrapped skeletons or hybrid animal burials which appear across Thrace, the charred bones cluster in just a few isolated tombs. This wasn't a universal rite, it was something reserved for a select few. Modern analysis reveals a clue. Many of the burned skeletons show elevated levels of mercury in their bones, hinting at a possible link to the mysterious mercury pools found in other graves. Were these individuals priests or shamans, their bodies ritually sealed with fire and poison to serve as guardians in death? The truth may lie in the flames themselves. Fire doesn't just destroy, it transforms, and the Thracians, it seems, weren't just disposing of their dead. They were rewriting them, leaving behind bones that gleam not with gold, but with something far more primal, the indelible mark of a culture that believed even in death the body could be reshaped. Whether as purification, punishment, or passport to another world, these blackened bones are more than relics. They're scars burned into history by hands we can no longer see, for reasons we can only guess. At the threshold of a Thracian king's tomb, archaeologists uncovered a doorway unlike any other, flanked not by statues or carvings, but by towering sheets of polished bronze, each reflecting the chamber beyond with unsettling clarity. These weren't just decorative mirrors, their surfaces had been buffed to a flawless shine, their edges beveled to catch even the faintest light. When torches were lit during the excavation, the effect was dizzying. The flames multiplied infinitely in the reflective surfaces, creating the illusion of a corridor stretching into endless darkness. This was no accident of design. The Thracians didn't just bury their dead, they built gateways. The so-called mirror gate serves as both barrier and beacon. Bronze mirrors were rare in antiquity, reserved for nobility and ritual. But here they weren't handheld vanity objects, they were architectural, embedded into the tomb's very structure. One theory suggests they functioned as spiritual deflectors, repelling evil by bouncing back malicious forces. Folklore across the Balkans speaks of mirrors as tools to trap or banish spirits, and the Thracians may have scaled this belief to monumental proportions. The positioning supports this. The mirrors face outward, angled slightly downward as if to cast reflections toward intruders' feet, a deliberate choice, possibly meant to disorient or humble those who approach. Yet there's a deeper layer to their purpose. Thracian burial texts recovered from Greek sources describe the soul's journey as a passage through rivers of light. The mirrors could have served as celestial guides, their surfaces capturing and amplifying torchlight to simulate stars in the tomb's perpetual night. Imagine the burial ceremony. Mourners carrying flames would see their reflections multiplied, their faces merging with the dead in a shimmering tableau. Was this meant to symbolize the living escorting the deceased into the afterlife, or to create a bridge between worlds? The most unsettling possibility emerges from the mirror's craftsmanship. X-ray scans reveal that some were backed with thin layers of cinnabar, the same mercury-laced pigment that tints the frescoes of wolf-headed figures. Mercury was believed to hold supernatural properties, and its inclusion here suggests these weren't passive reflectors but active ritual objects. One fragmentary inscription near the gate mentions the eyes of the gatekeeper, hinting that the mirrors were more than tools. They were sentinels watching and judging whoever passed through. Torchlight experiments reveal another eerie detail. As flames flicker, the reflections warp and shift, creating the illusion of movement in the empty tomb. Shadows stretch like reaching hands, light pools in ways that defy natural physics. Some archaeologists argue this was intentional, a form of ancient projection meant to simulate the presence of spirits. Others point to the mirror's strategic placement directly opposite murals of dancing figures, suggesting they were part of a larger spectacle, blending art and reflection to bring the walls to life. What's undeniable is the mirror's enduring power. Even today, tarnished by millennia, they cast dim reflections of anyone who stands before them. The gate doesn't just separate the living from the dead, it merges them, if only for a moment. Whether as shield, guide, or living portal, one truth remains: the Thracians didn't just build tombs, they built thresholds, and some doors, it seems, were never meant to close. Deep within a sealed Thracian burial chamber, archaeologists uncovered a site that blurred the line between death and preservation. A warrior's body submerged in a massive clay vat, his flesh still eerily intact after thousands of years. The secret: honey, thick, golden, and still faintly fragrant. This natural embalming fluid had defied decay, leaving the warrior's features recognizable, his skin leathery but unbroken, even the delicate cartilage of his ears preserved in perfect detail. This wasn't just a fortunate accident of chemistry. The vat's placement directly at the tomb's center suggests a ritual so deliberate it challenges our understanding of ancient mortuary science. Why honey? Was it practical, sacred, or both? The science behind honey's preservative power is undeniable. Its low moisture content, acidic pH, and natural hydrogen peroxide create an environment where bacteria and fungi simply can't survive. Ancient cultures from Egypt to China used it to heal wounds and preserve food, but the Thracians took this knowledge further. Unlike the Egyptians, who removed organs and desiccated bodies with natron, this warrior was simply immersed, as if the honey were a kind of liquid sarcophagus. The effect is startling. His muscles contracted by time but not rotted, his tattoos faint traces of spirals and wolves still visible on his arms. This wasn't mummification as the world typically thinks of it. It was suspension, a pause button pressed on decomposition itself. Yet practicality alone doesn't explain the choice. Honey held deep symbolic weight for the Thracians. Their myths describe the afterlife as a golden feast, where heroes dined on food that never spoiled and drank from rivers of mead. By bathing their dead in honey, they might have been replicating this paradise, ensuring the warrior arrived in the next world already anointed with its bounty. There's also the matter of bees, sacred in many Indo-European cultures as messengers between realms. Local folklore tells of honey-tongued spirits who guided souls through the underworld's darkest passes. Could the vat have been both preservative and passport, its sweetness a bribe or a beacon for divine escorts? The warrior's grave goods add another layer of mystery. Nestled beside the vat were clay amphorae labeled with bee motifs, their interiors stained with traces of fermented honey, likely ritual mead. A dagger lay across his chest, its hilt shaped like a buzzing swarm. Most haunting of all, his lips were parted slightly, and forensic analysis revealed a thick residue of honey in his mouth. This wasn't just external preservation, it was ingestion, a final meal meant to sweeten his journey. The act echoes Greek accounts of Thracian funeral rites, where mourners drank honeyed wine to commune with the dead. But here, the dead himself partook, as if consumption bridged the gap between worlds. Not every society would dare such a practice. Honey was extravagantly valuable, a luxury item traded like precious metals. To waste gallons of it on a single corpse speaks to either staggering wealth or staggering devotion. Some scholars argue this was status symbolism, a flex of resources so audacious it shouted the warrior's importance into eternity. Others see desperation. Perhaps this man died far from home, and honey was the only way to keep him intact until his spirit reached its destination. The truth may lie in the honey source. Pollen analysis reveals it came from linden trees, which Thracians associated with immortality. Every drop, then, was chosen with intent. What lingers most is the intimacy of the act. Unlike stone tombs or gold masks, honey required constant care. Someone had to harvest it, strain it, pour it with precision. This warrior wasn't just buried, he was tended to, submerged in a substance that demanded human hands at every stage. In that way, the honey vat is less a coffin and more a last embrace, viscous and golden and unbroken by time. Whether science, sacrifice, or spell, one thing's certain: 2,000 years later, the air around his body still carries the faintest scent of blossoms, as if even death couldn't steal all the sweetness away. Beneath the still surface of a secluded Thracian lake lies a structure that defies all logic. An entire tomb built to exist underwater. Unlike the grand burial mounds dotting the countryside, this one was designed to vanish beneath the waves, its entrance accessible only to those willing to dive into the depths. The craftsmanship is undeniable, stone blocks precisely fitted to withstand currents, corridors angled to prevent collapse, and artifacts sealed in waterproof chambers. But the real mystery isn't how they built it, it's why. What could compel a civilization to bury its dead where no one could easily follow? The logistics alone boggle the mind. Constructing underwater in antiquity required ingenious engineering, weighted materials to counter buoyancy, pulleys to lower stones without cracking them, and mortar mixed with substances like beeswax to repel water. Some chambers even feature air pockets, suggesting builders may have used inverted pots or leather bags to create temporary workstations underwater. The effort speaks to obsession, not practicality. Yet the tomb's contents are even more puzzling. Divers retrieving artifacts report an eerie preservation, bronze weapons untarnished, wooden carvings intact, as if the water itself was part of the ritual. One prevailing theory points to defense. Thracian tombs were often plundered, their treasures stripped within generations, but a sunken tomb, even the most determined robbers would hesitate to brave dark, cold waters for uncertain reward. The placement feels deliberate, almost mocking, wealth visible yet just out of reach, yet the artifacts inside tell a different story. Among the usual grave goods, excavators found offerings rarely seen in dry burials: pearls, coral, even a carved figurine of a fish-tailed deity clutching a trident. This wasn't just hidden treasure, it was a tribute carefully curated for a realm where water ruled. Local legends offer a haunting clue. Thracian oral traditions speak of the drowned god, a deity who demanded sacrifices be sunk into sacred lakes. Could this tomb be an extension of that belief, a place where the dead became offerings themselves? The structure's layout supports this. The main chamber sits at the deepest point, its walls carved with wave-like patterns that ripple under flashlight beams. More telling are the human remains, some skeletons weighted with stones, their limbs arranged as if mid-swim. These weren't casual burials, they were staged descents, as though the deceased were expected to travel downward, not upward in the afterlife. Then there's the boundary theory. Many cultures view water as a liminal space, a divider between worlds. The Celts threw swords into lakes to arm spirits. The Vikings buried ships to sail to the afterlife. For the Thracians, a sunken tomb might have served as a literal gateway, a way station where souls could shed their earthly forms before passing into the unknown. The tomb's orientation leans into this. Its entrance faces the setting sun, so twilight rays penetrate the water at certain times of year, illuminating the central chamber like a beacon. Was this a celestial map guiding the dead through liquid twilight to whatever lay beyond? Modern divers describe an uncanny feeling when exploring the site, a sense of being watched, of currents tugging at them with unnatural precision. Some refuse to return, citing equipment malfunctions or fleeting shadows in the silt. Whether superstition or something stranger, the effect is undeniable. The Thracians didn't just bury their dead. They anchored them in a realm that defies easy explanation, where water isn't a barrier but a bridge. And at the bottom of that dark lake, the tomb still waits, its secrets kept safe by the very element meant to erode them. Deep inside a Thracian tomb, hidden beneath layers of earth, archaeologists uncovered walls that didn't just hold secrets, they sang. Embedded in the stonework were dozens of carefully placed slate slabs, each one precisely shaped and positioned. At first glance, they looked like ordinary construction materials, but when tapped lightly with a mallet, they emitted clear, resonant tones, some deep and gong-like, others high and crystalline. These weren't structural accidents. They were an ancient instrument built into the very bones of the tomb, waiting silently for someone or something to play them. The so-called singing stones aren't random rocks. Each one was carefully selected for its sonic properties, then chiseled to perfect thickness and suspended in the walls with small gaps to allow vibration. Modern acousticians who studied them were stunned. The stones produce a scale of notes eerily similar to the pentatonic sequences found in traditional Balkan folk music, a scale that predates written history. Some chambers even feature stones arranged in deliberate patterns, as if to play melodies when struck in sequence. This wasn't just decoration, it was architecture as orchestra, a tomb designed to resonate. But who was meant to hear this music? One theory suggests the stones were part of funeral rites, their tones guiding the dead through the underworld. Thracian texts describe shamans using drumbeats and chanting to navigate spiritual realms. Could these lithic gongs have served a similar purpose, their vibrations acting as a map for lost souls? Others propose a darker function, the stones as a warning system. Struck in a certain order, their notes might amplify through the tomb's corridors, alerting guardians to intruders. The most haunting possibility, the stones weren't for the living at all. Infrasound studies reveal some frequencies are nearly inaudible to humans but vibrate at pitches known to induce unease or even visions. Were these walls meant to sing to the dead or to whatever might linger beside them? Modern musicians have tried to reconstruct the tomb's soundscape, striking the stones in sequences based on their placement. The result is unsettling. A melody that feels both alien and familiar, like a half-remembered lullaby. One composer noted how certain notes seemed to harmonize with the tomb's natural acoustics, creating echoing overtones that linger far longer than physics should allow. It's as if the Thracians didn't just understand sound, they weaponized it, crafting frequencies that could unsettle, soothe, or summon. Perhaps the most telling clue lies in the stones themselves. Unlike the gold and silver treasures plundered by grave robbers, these lithic instruments were left untouched, not because they lacked value, but because their power wasn't in ownership. It was in activation. Whoever built this tomb didn't just want to bury their dead. They wanted to keep them company, filling the silence with music that outlasted even memory. And though the last hand to strike these stones turned to dust centuries ago, the walls still hum with potential, a symphony frozen in stone, waiting for the next note to fall. Among the most enigmatic features in Thracian tombs are what archaeologists call false doors, meticulously carved stone slabs that mimic real doorways down to the finest detail, yet lead nowhere. These aren't crude etchings, but full-scale illusions. lintels, jambs, even hinges rendered in stone with such precision that from a distance you'd swear they could swing open. But touch them and the truth becomes chillingly clear: they're solid, unyielding, sealed forever. The question isn't just why the Thracians built them, but why they bothered to make them so convincing in the first place. False doors weren't unique to Thrace. The Egyptians used them extensively, often as symbolic portals for the deceased's ka or spirit to pass between worlds. But the Thracian versions diverge in striking ways. Egyptian false doors tend to be ornate, covered in hieroglyphs and offerings, functioning as spiritual mailboxes where the living could leave prayers. The Thracian equivalents are eerily minimalist: no inscriptions, no carvings of food or gifts, just stark, flawless imitations of architecture. Some even feature subtle indentations where real doors would have handles, taunting anyone who tries to pull them open. The effect is less an invitation than a riddle, a boundary that exists only to emphasize its own impassability. One theory suggests these doors were decoys designed to frustrate grave robbers by diverting attention from the tomb's true entrance. Unlike Egyptian tombs, which often concealed chambers behind false walls, Thracian architects may have leaned into psychological warfare, dangling the idea of access while hiding the real treasures elsewhere. A few tombs support this. Behind one such door, excavators found only a hollow space filled with broken pottery, as if to mock intruders, but other sites complicate the narrative. In a royal burial near Sevtopolis, the false door was positioned opposite the actual burial chamber, its surface smeared with traces of animal fat and ochre, evidence of repeated ritual contact. This wasn't just a bluff, it was a focal point for ceremony. The most haunting interpretation ties the doors to Thracian cosmology. Unlike the Egyptians' linear journey through the afterlife, Thracian beliefs hinted at cyclical transitions, souls moving through layers of existence, perhaps even returning. Their false doors might represent these thresholds, not as passages to be used, but as reminders of the boundaries between realms. Some feature faint carvings of spirals or wave patterns, symbols found in their celestial maps, suggesting the doors were less physical than metaphysical, a kind of stargate frozen in stone. Then there's the local folklore. Centuries after the last Thracian tomb was sealed, Balkan myths spoke of ghost doors, apparitions that appeared in caves or mountains where none existed before. Those who tried to walk through them vanished, those who ignored them were spared. Could these tomb carvings be early echoes of that legend, warnings dressed as architecture? The Thracians left no manuals, but the door's precision speaks volumes. They weren't built to function. They were built to mean something, to teach, to test, or to terrify. And as the last flicker of torchlight fades across their uncanny surfaces, they still do. Scattered across the floor of a Thracian priest's tomb, tiny glass beads glimmer like a stolen piece of the night sky, except these weren't meant to adorn. Arranged in precise clusters, they form intricate patterns that, when viewed from above, reveal something astonishing: miniature landscapes. Some show winding river valleys marked with amber beads. Others depict mountain ranges rendered in cobalt dots, all connected by fragile threads of silver wire long since corroded to dust. These aren't random decorations, they're maps, but not just any maps. These three-dimensional mosaics seem to chart sacred sites, their accuracy confirmed when archaeologists overlaid them with known Thracian holy grounds. The question isn't just how they achieved such precision without aerial views or modern cartography. It's why they buried such masterpieces where no living eye could see them. The craftsmanship defies logic. Each bead, no larger than a pinhead, was heated and shaped to represent specific terrain features: flattened discs for lakes, elongated ovals for ridges, even translucent green beads to denote forests. The materials themselves tell a story of obsession. Analysis reveals glass from as far as Egypt and Mesopotamia, colors painstakingly achieved with metal oxides that wouldn't become commonplace for centuries. But the real shock came when researchers noticed recurring symbols. Certain sites, always near water sources, were marked with blood-red beads, while others bore tiny bronze rings around them like fortified walls. One particularly unsettling map showed 7 black beads arranged in a perfect circle around a hilltop, matching the configuration of standing stones later found in the Rhodope Mountains. Were these guides for the dead, leading them to places of power in the afterlife? Debate rages over their purpose. Some scholars argue they're territorial markers, buried with spiritual leaders to legitimize their clan's claim to sacred land. Others see them as ritual tools, perhaps consulted during divination, with shamans traveling the bead landscapes in trance states to predict battles or harvests. The most chilling theory posits they were emergency maps for souls navigating the underworld's perils, their tiny rivers and peaks mirroring a realm only the dead could enter. Modern parallels deepen the mystery. Indigenous cultures from the Arctic to Australia created similar story maps to encode ancestral knowledge, while medieval monks etched pilgrimage routes onto beads for safe passage. But the Thracian versions stand apart in their eerie precision and their secrecy. Recent experiments add fuel to the fire. When sunlight passes through certain blue beads, it projects patterns on walls that match celestial events like solstice alignments at Thracian temples. One bead cluster, when photographed under ultraviolet light, glows along lines that eerily trace underground water sources. Were these maps also calendars, divining rods, or even early geospatial calculators? Their creators left no instructions, only these silent glass landscapes waiting for someone to walk their paths. As archaeologists painstakingly reassemble each bead, one truth becomes clear: the Thracians didn't just bury their dead with treasure. They buried them with worlds. Among the most unsettling artifacts pulled from Thracian tombs are ceramic vessels that refuse to fade, their surfaces stained a deep, lurid red that still glistens as if freshly painted. This isn't ordinary ochre or rust, it's a pigment so chemically stubborn it defies millennia of decay, clinging to the pottery like a curse. Chemical analysis reveals its secret: cinnabar, a mercury-based mineral so toxic its mining was considered a death sentence in antiquity. Yet the Thracians didn't just handle it, they crafted entire funerary sets drenched in the stuff, their rims and handles streaked as though dipped in blood. What could justify such reckless reverence for a color that came at such a cost? The answer might lie in the pigment's paradoxical nature. Cinnabar's brilliance was legendary. Roman elites used it to paint entire villas scarlet, but its dangers were equally infamous. Breathing its dust caused tremors, madness, and death, yet the Thracians treated it with ceremonial precision. Some vessels show fingerprints preserved in the pigment, suggesting artisans applied it bare-handed during rituals, their skin absorbing poison with every stroke. Was this a form of sacred self-sacrifice, or did they possess lost knowledge of handling toxic materials safely? The pottery's designs offer clues. Many feature scenes of warriors bleeding from wounds, their crimson streams mirroring the vessel's own hue. One particularly macabre crater depicts a figure holding a bowl beneath a sacrificial bull's slit throat, the red glaze pooling where liquid would collect in reality. This wasn't mere artistic flair. Thracian death rites often blurred metaphor and literal act. Greek historians wrote of warriors drinking diluted blood before battle to absorb their enemy's strength, while tomb murals show priestesses offering red-stained cups to the dead. The vessel's placement in graves supports this. They're frequently found near skeletons' mouths or hands, as if used in a final ritual toast. Modern spectrometry confirms traces of fermented beverages in some cups, mixed with hemoglobin from animal blood. But the cinnabar itself adds a sinister layer. Mercury binds to organic compounds, preserving them. Those who drank from these cups may have unknowingly mummified their own remains from within. Yet the symbolism runs deeper than sacrifice. In Thracian cosmology, red wasn't just the color of death, it was life's essence. Their word for blood, kravi, also meant strength and lineage, tying spilled fluid to ancestral power. A prince's tomb in Shipka contained 30 such vessels, each painted with a different clan's totem animal in cinnabar, as if binding bloodlines together for eternity. The pigment's permanence was key. Where actual blood would rot, this artificial substitute endured, a perpetual lifeline to the underworld. Even the pottery's firing process was ritualized. Kiln temperatures had to stay low to prevent mercury vaporization, forcing potters to work at night when cooler air stabilized the heat, a practice that may have birthed myths of blood crafters who communed with moon spirits. The final enigma lies in who could touch these cursed objects. Unlike gold or weapons, which were buried freely, the red pottery appears only in select graves, usually those of warriors, shamans, or women buried with birthing tools. One burial near Plovdiv held a skeleton clutching a red cup to its chest, the ribs beneath stained scarlet from cinnabar leaching into the bones. Was this an honor, a punishment, or a means of marking certain dead as keepers of dangerous knowledge? With no written records, we're left staring into these vessels' mirrored surfaces, where the reflections staring back are neither fully human nor wholly artifact, but something caught between, like the Thracians themselves, who painted their dead in a color that outlived empires, still whispering in a language of poison and permanence. The grandest tomb of all holds no body, no treasures, no whispers of the dead, only silence and a throne. Carved from a single block of black marble, its arms shaped like snarling wolves, this seat dominates the chamber with an authority that needs no occupant. The craftsmanship is exquisite, every detail suggesting it was meant for someone, or something of unimaginable importance. Yet the dust on its surface lies undisturbed, as though no one ever claimed it. Who was this throne built for? A king who never came, a god who refused to descend, or was it never meant to be filled at all? Thracian kingship wasn't just about power, it was a sacred covenant between ruler and divinity. Ancient texts describe their kings as bridges, mortal vessels chosen by the gods to channel their will. Some tombs feature carvings of rulers ascending to the heavens, but this one offers only emptiness, as if the throne itself was the destination. The symbolism is potent, no skeleton, no golden mask, just a seat that outlasts flesh, a monument to authority beyond mortality. Could this have been a spiritual reservation, a place where the king's soul was meant to return and judge the living? Local folklore speaks of the waiting king, a ruler who would rise from slumber to lead his people in their darkest hour. This throne, untouched and eternal, might have been his promised seat. The throne's design deepens the mystery. Its high back is etched with celestial patterns, constellations that match the night sky during the winter solstice, when Thracian myths say the veil between worlds thins. The armrests, those twin wolves, aren't just decorative. Wolves were sacred to the Thracians, symbols of both protector and destroyer. Their mouths gape toward the throne's center, forever frozen mid-snarl, as if guarding or warning whoever might dare to sit. Beneath the seat, hidden until recently, lies a hollow chamber containing a single artifact, a bronze crown too small for a human head. Was this meant for a child king who died before coronation? Or something stranger, an offering to a deity who preferred crowns to corpses? The most unsettling theory comes from neighboring cultures. Scythian bards sang of thrones that drank kings, sacrificial seats where rulers were ritually slain to renew the land's fertility. Could this empty throne be a silent witness to such a rite? There's no bloodstain, no blade marks, but absence speaks louder than evidence. If a king sat here only in death, his body removed after the ceremony, it would explain the tomb's eerie cleanliness, its lack of remains. The Thracians believed in cycles, harvests, seasons, lives. Perhaps the throne was the axis of that cycle, a tool for rebirth that demanded a king's departure as surely as it awaited his return. Yet the chamber itself argues against violence. The walls are painted with scenes of feasting, not sacrificed nobles raising cups toward the throne as if in toast. One fresco shows a figure cloaked in shadows, one hand resting on the throne's arm, the other holding a staff that cracks the earth like lightning. The paint's pigments have faded, but the message lingers. This wasn't a seat of endings, but of transformation. Whether meant for a god, a ghost, or a king who vanished between legend and history, the throne's power lies in its vacancy. It doesn't need a body to command. It only needs the question, the endless, echoing who to keep its secrets alive. And so the throne waits as it has for millennia, not for an answer, but for the next visitor to kneel before it, peer into that emptiness, and wonder what they would see if it ever chose to show them. From golden masks whispering forgotten names to tombs submerged in lakes of liquid mercury, the Thracians defied every convention of their time. These 25 discoveries don't just fill museum cases, they shatter assumptions. Who were these people, really? A culture that wrapped skeletons in silver foil, buried warriors with crystal arrowheads, and painted murals of wolf-headed gods clearly saw the world through a lens we've yet to fully decipher. Their tombs weren't just graves, they were bridges between realms, packed with chariots for the underworld, singing stones to guide the lost, and honey-soaked bodies preserved like offerings to eternity itself. What chills the spine isn't just the scale of their secrets, it's the patterns. That labyrinth with no center, those hollow statues holding unseen contents, the mirrors multiplying torchlight into infinity, each feels like a piece of some grander design. Were these practices isolated to Thrace, or fragments of a lost worldview stretching from the Balkans to the Baltic? Consider the amber beads from the north, the cinnabar pigment traded from the east, the Orphic scrolls echoing mysteries as far as Egypt. The Thracians weren't just borrowing, they were synthesizing, remixing the spiritual and scientific knowledge of their age into something entirely their own. Yet the most haunting questions remain unanswered. Why char bones without cremating them? Why stash maps of sacred sites in glass beads only to bury them forever? And who or what was meant to sit on that empty marble throne? These aren't gaps in history, they're deliberate silences left by a people who mastered metals, music, and mortality itself, then took their truths underground. Maybe that's the point. The Thracians didn't build tombs to be solved. They built them to endure, to tease, to whisper across millennia that some doors stay closed for a reason. So what do you think? Were they visionaries or keepers of forbidden knowledge, a lost branch of human belief, or the missing link in a chain we've yet to uncover? Drop your wildest theories below, and if you're craving more ancient enigmas, hit subscribe. The past isn't done with